Well, well, well. What a week it's been, but here we are again. They let us get to Friday. That means it's time for another episode of the Leaf podcast. In this one, there's no real overarching theme. It's just a bunch of stuff that I found interesting, which that's kind of the point of the whole thing. But I got some encounters with the Fae, a really wild anonymous story about a medium, and another conspiracy theory that I had heard that I cannot remember where I heard it, but I'll tell you what it is anyways. And by that I mean just the gist of it, because I don't remember, I read so much stuff that sometimes I forget the inner details of it, but the short version was that the Great Flood never ended. We're still living through it. And the theory goes on to say that because there are so many half-sunken or missing continents that the flood never truly ended. I could be mistaken, but I think the example used was that Easter Island is the remnant of a lost continent, and New Zealand and Australia used to be a supercontinent, but I don't remember for sure. But yeah, if anybody's heard of that, let me know the real version or the full version down in the comments, because it was pretty interesting to see. So I thought that I would just bring that up first because it was on my mind while recording this. And now the next one that I want to talk about is the interesting, kind of scary, kind of spooky medium story that was anonymous. So it starts like this. This is the series of events surrounding what I experienced regarding my nephew's death. I am not great at telling stories though. So this was in the early 2000s. I was bouncing between my mom's house and my grandmother's. I was about 12 during the time. Technically, I should have been at my grandmother's since she had custody of me, but my mom was working on gaining custody of me again, so we were kind of bending some rules. During all this, my mom was given custody of my nephew and niece after my sister abandoned them. Let's call them Edward and Bonnie. During the summer, my stepdad is released from prison, and him and my mom immediately start cooking meth again. Edward is showing behavioral problems. He's a toddler, and he's suffering from abuse that my sister and his dad put him through. My stepdad claims he can fix my nephew, but it's just more horrific abuse. It's November. My grandmother has a fall and needs someone to take care of her. They thought that I would be the best person, because, yeah, that makes sense. Anyways, I moved back to my grandmother's about 10 hours away from my mom's house. Before I leave, my nephew, in the same kind of way that a 4-year-old speaks, says, "You won't see me again. I love you." This kind of rattled me, so I tell my grandmother about this, and she explains that toddlers and babies don't really have object permanence, so I just thought it was that. The very next month, December of that same year, the phone rings in our kitchen and I answer it. It was my grandmother and our neighbor, and they were mid-conversation when I answered the phone. And suddenly, I hear my grandmother sobbing. She's saying, "I can't believe it. I can't believe he's dead. She killed him." Suddenly, my grandmother comes from the living room and asks me who was on the phone. I look at her, and it's obvious that she hasn't been crying. I was so confused. I tell her that I heard her on the phone and our neighbor had asked who died. She said, "Don't be stupid. I wasn't on the phone and no one died." It turns out she was outside on the front porch having drinks with said neighbor and not even in the house. All this came from the phone. Later that night, I had vivid dreams of news reporters talking about a couple killing their grandson. That next morning, I'm trying to blow it off. I'm in the living room, I'm playing Legend of Zelda, Wind Waker, and I suddenly hear my grandmother screaming from the kitchen, "He's dead. Edward is dead. She killed him." I run into the kitchen to find out that my stepdad and mom had killed my nephew. Later that afternoon, I hear my grandmother talking on the phone, and I pick up the phone trying to eavesdrop on the conversation. It was the same exact conversation. It was word for word the one that I had heard. her and our neighbor on the phone the day before. On my grandmother's deathbed, 3 years later, she held my hand and said, "I blame you for Edward's death." Fast forward to 2016, and I'm wandering around a flea market. There's a medium tarot card palm reader person there, giving free readings. I don't believe in any of that shit, so I keep walking. I end up walking past the person again hours later, and this time, she's beckoning me over. Me, being an edgy young adult, I decide to humor her. I go over and sit down, and she grabs my hand. And then she just says, "Edward wants you to stop being sad about him dying. It wasn't your fault. You were just a child. He loves you, and he wants you to be happy. Edward is here with us now. He's been following you around." It was so sudden and so shocking to me that she knew the name and everything that happened off the bat that it kind of made me start believing in the paranormal. In 2020, I started to go to therapy to heal from the trauma and all that. And now, whenever I dream about confronting my abusers or something about healing related from trauma, my nephew is there with me, smiling and encouraging me on. So let me know what you thought about that story down in the comments. I've been to a medium myself a couple of times. Both times were completely free because they just wanted to talk to me. And I never got anything like that. Then again, I've never had anything like that happen. But I got a lot more general stuff like, you don't like coffee? And I'm like, well, that's true. I don't like coffee. I like the smell, but I can't stand the taste of it. She told me stuff like that I was an old soul and that I had a lot of past lives and kind of general stuff like that. Then she told me that there was a lot of family members who were looking out for me and just, again, more general stuff like that. There was nothing super specific like naming the person right off. This is random, but I think she also told me to pay attention to the colors red and green, and my first thought was just the red-green show, which if you're Canadian, you'll definitely know what that is. But let me know if you've had any crazy experiences with a medium. Did they say something that was really undoubtedly like something nobody else would know? Because I'm curious. And I also would never tell a kid, "Oh, I believe it's your fault that your nephew died." That's just kind of not something I would do. But also, just extrapolating from the information in the story, it seems like the family is not really stable and has a lot of demons. But yeah, I'm curious to know if you guys have had any crazy experiences with mediums. Do you even believe in them? Because for me, a lot of the times, I'm on the fence about them. I feel like that, like in this case, they do something crazy like that. But in my case, they just kind of tell me general stuff. So I don't know. What do you think? And now, we'll get into some really crazy encounters with the Fae. And of course, whenever I find these articles, I always link them down in the description. This article was written by Brent Swanser, so he's a great writer. You should really check him out. And of course, there will be more in-depth stuff in this article, and there will be more stories in this article. I'm just going to go over a couple ones that I found really interesting and really creepy. So here we go. In this first one, it appears in a book that was called The Fairy Faith in Celtic Countries. It was published in 1911 by Walter Yeating Evans Wentz. And in this book, he interviews a 73-year-old, Neil Colton, who said that as a kid, in 1853, he had a pretty strange run-in with the fairies. He said that it was a summer day, and he had been put with his brother and his cousin. They were out gathering berries in the countryside, and then they heard something. It was music, but this music almost sounded ethereal. And now as kids, especially in a group, you're very curious. You want to know where this is coming from, especially who's playing it. They heard it coming from over by some rocks, so they went over there to investigate. They said that there was a whole band of fairies dancing in a clearing. And while they watched them, one of these little fairies, a woman dressed in red, suddenly noticed that they were being watched. This fairy seemed to be overcome with rage, and then rush forward with some kind of weapon in her hand, a stick or a rush, to strike the cousin across the cheek. After being struck, she fell backwards and grabbed Colton's brother's arm to keep from falling. This sent the group scurrying away in a panic. At some point, they realized that the girl wasn't with her. When they turned around, they noticed that Colton's cousin had seemingly collapsed to the ground, was totally unresponsive, and seemingly dead. They ran back and told their parents. Their father went and got the priest by the name of Father Ryan. Once Father Ryan had got to the scene, he said a prayer over her body, which after that, she miraculously and slowly woke up. The priest would conclude that it was only because that she had grabbed her cousin before falling that is what stopped her from being taken by the fairies forever. Now, the first thing I'd like to say about that is I'm not sure about where everybody else that's listening lives, but like I said before, I live in the Maritimes, and in the Maritimes, especially in Newfoundland, the belief in fairies is still quite strong. And not only that, but when out in the woods, I found fairy circles before, and, nothing happened when I was near them. At least nothing that I think happened. Unless some crazy shit did happen, and I don't remember, because that seems to be the takeaway from when people come back from the fairy realm. They don't quite remember what happened, or they're not allowed to talk about it. Yeah, the belief in fairies is generally because this whole area of Canada, and I think even down into the New England states, was settled by a lot of Irish people, and they brought their beliefs over with them. And I also know that a little bit in my province, we have a little bit of a combination of Irish beliefs, native beliefs, and your typical Catholic or Anglican fare as well. So there's a really weird mixture. So these stories are not out of the realm of something I haven't heard before. But I think what's interesting to say is that these are only the stories from the people who were able to come back, or the people who weren't taken. So, Lord knows what happened to the people who were. And another thing I found pretty weird too, ironic, I don't know the word for it, a coincidence, I guess, is the best word for it, is how that they found them dancing by an outcropping of rocks. And what that reminds me of is a lot of missing 411 cases that have a lot of outcroppings of rocks, a lot of granite fields or boulder fields. I don't know if they're related or not, it just kind of piqued my attention. I don't know about you. I could be just completely off the beaten path schizo, but it just kind of piqued my attention. And speaking of fairy circles, that leads us into the next encounter, from 1755, near the Vale of Neath in South Wales. Two farm servants by the names of Rise ap Morgan and Llewellyn Walter were walking toward a farm one evening, when Rise stopped and said that he could hear music playing, but Walter could hear nothing. Rise told him that he could head back home while he went to search for who was playing the music. He wanted to talk to them. He said it sounded ethereal. Llewellyn thought that he just wanted to get out of work, and then he just left his friend behind to head home. When the next morning came, Rise was nowhere to be seen. Llewellyn told his boss that something had happened the previous night. The whole area was searched, and then they even searched the nearby alehouse, but there was no sign of him. It was such an odd disappearance that people began to become suspicious, and the blame fell on Llewellyn that maybe he had done something, that he had killed him. These allegations and stuff would continue for a full year before the story came to a local farmer. This farmer said that it probably has something to do with the fairies. He asked Llewellyn to take him and some friends to the exact spot where Rise had disappeared. The farmer claimed that it was a fairy circle, and that Rise had been snatched away with it. At that moment, Llewellyn could allegedly hear harp music that nobody else could hear. The farmer then noticed that the servant's foot was partially within the circle. When all the men present placed their feet in the circle, they found that they too could hear this ethereal music. They could also see little child-sized figures dancing about, along with the missing guy dancing with them. Llewellyn then grabbed his friend and pulled him out of the circle, which Rise said that he wanted to dance a little more, as he had just gotten there. When asked what he meant, he claimed that he had only been there for scarcely 5 minutes, even though a whole year had passed. And the more he spoke about the passage of time, it seemed that he didn't have any inkling at all that he had been gone so long. He found himself unable to clearly remember his time with the fairies in that circle. And then something else bizarre happened. Not long after leaving the circle, Rise would get sick, very sick, and he would die not long after. So what do you think happened there? Do you think that he somehow got acclimated to the other world, and then when he came back, it was too much of a shock? If that's the case, what's different about their world with ours? I have heard lots of stories about you can only go there for very, very short periods of time, or else you'll be stuck there and you won't be able to come back because you'll just die. But why do you think that is? Let me know down in the comments. And from the same book that I mentioned earlier, there's another odd account. This is from a man who calls the fairies gentries. It was near a place called Ben Bulben, and here's what he said about what happened to him. When I was a young man, I often used to go out into the mountains over there to fish for trout or to hunt, and it was January on a cold, dry day, and while carrying my gun, I and my friend, as we were walking around Ben Bulben, saw one of the gentry for the first time. I knew who it was, for I had heard about these described ever since I could remember, and this one was dressed in blue with a headdress that was adorned with what seemed to be frills. When he came up to us, he said to me in a sweet and silvery voice, "The seldomer you come to this mountain, the better. A young lady here wants to take you away." Then he told us not to fire off our guns, because the gentry dislike being disturbed by the noise. He seemed to be like a soldier of the gentry on guard. As they were leaving the mountains, he told us never to look back, and we didn't. Another time I was alone trout fishing in nearly the same region when I heard a voice say, "It is barefooted and fishing." Then there came a whistle like music and a noise like the beating of a drum, and soon one of the gentry came and talked with me for half an hour. He said, "Your mother will die in 11 months, and do not let her die unanointed." And she did die within 11 months. As he was going away, he warned me, "You must be in the house before sunset. Do not delay. Do not delay. They can do nothing to you until I get back in the castle." As I found out afterwards, he was going to take me, but hesitated because he did not want to leave my mother alone. After these warnings, I was always afraid to go into the mountains, but lately I've been told I could go if I took a friend with me. Personally, that sounds like a great way to get the both of you abducted. My luck, I'd go out there with them, and then all of a sudden, they have like a search party that just finds my sneakers, and they're just holding them up on the news, like this is all that's left of them. But anyways, I really would not go back into those mountains. I probably wouldn't go anywhere near them, especially if like an entity that I couldn't usually see just came out and told me that he was going to take me, but he didn't because he felt bad about it. And before I go, I think the better question is, have you had any encounters with the Fae? Have you heard stories of them? Have you heard of any of the ones that I've mentioned here? And as I said earlier, I'll leave the link in the description that you can read the full article, because there's a lot more than the ones that I talked about. And I do think it's a little odd, maybe, I guess is the best word, that they talk about the difference in time between going there and coming back, thinking it's been 5 minutes when it's been a year in our time. And then people who have abduction cases, who they think they've been gone maybe years, and they come back and it's only been one night. So, what do you think's going on there? That's some weird time manipulation, I don't know. But I'll let you decide what it is. If you enjoyed this episode of the podcast, then make sure to like and subscribe. If you would like to donate to the channel, there's links in the description, there's memberships and super thanks here on YouTube. And with all of that, I thank you for pulling up a stump with me. I thank you for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, favorite, share with your friends, all that great stuff. And I will see you on Sunday. Thank you for pulling up a stump. Thank you for watching. Have a good weekend.